impact Sly Cooper had on me growing up cannot be understated. From struggling against a Master Thief sprint challenges to pulling off heists to steal back to clockwork parts, Sly Cooper endeared me in a way no other game had. Its usage of anthropomorphic characters while still managing to handle an adult film noir tone engrossed me as a kid, while the combination of stealth and platforming elements gave me a different insight into the genre I had not seen before. However, we are here to discuss the rather polarizing Sly 4, otherwise known as Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. But before we get into that, I thought it was necessary for me to share my thoughts on the original Sucker Punch trilogy. Being only the second game Sucker Punch had made, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus laid a lot of the groundwork for the sequels, while definitely the simpler one in scope, kind of being Crash Bandicoot with minor stealth elements. Some of the little things like the film noir atmosphere, the comic book-like cutscenes, or the vast array of acrobatic moves Sly can perform with the tap of a circle button created an experience familiar yet unique. Not to mention that this is one of the few games that actually allowed you to listen to developer commentary like a DVD film.
How many times do you reckon you went through this level and relit it?
Maybe more than 30 times. Whoa, yeah.
Sly 2 Band of Thieves expanded on all these aspects by adding in a grittier story, a sandbox-style gameplay, and Bentley and Murray becoming playable. Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves then knit together a nice bow on top by finishing it all up with more playable characters that didn't interfere with the core gameplay as much, and a nice satisfying ending that brought closure to the series while still leaving it open for fans to possibly fill it in. Sly had always been an inspiring character for me, considering that beyond all the craftiness and thieving, he ultimately found his true value in his fellow gang members. It always kind of made me feel like he was a deeper character than most people dismissed him as. Yes, he is cunning, he is feisty, but the real trait that made me want to aspire to be him was his humanity. In fact, I'd probably think that Sly should have just left off from where Sly 3 ended. It basically ended with Sly finding more fulfillment with his personal longings instead of trying so hard to live up to his family name. It all felt like it settled down with a true epilogue. But I don't know what it was. Perhaps Sly's eye wink at the end signaled there was more to come, but people really started speculating a Sly 4. Hopes and dreams eventually went up when a teaser trailer for Sly 4 was included within the Sly collection. Finally, it was announced sometime in 2011 that Sanzaru Games would be taking the helm to develop Sly 4, and I remember as a kid just listening to Glenn Egan conduct interviews with game journalists trying to prop up this upcoming return to the thieving raccoon. Ah boy, I was a naive child back then.
This has Thieves in Time, is that correct?
Actually has Thieves in Time.
What a crazy idea. What a crazy idea. What a crazy idea.
A crazy idea, perhaps. But was it one worth reckoning? Does Sly 4 Thieves in Time Ninja Spire jump with the same grace and precision as the first three games? Or does it just fall? Well, it does raise a bit of an eyebrow that Sanzaru decided to name this game Sly Cooper Thieves in Time instead of Sly 4 Thieves in Time. I wonder what their thought process was behind calling it that. I am willing to look at it with an open mind. After all, as they always say, never judge a book by its cover. On second thought, I think I'll see myself out. So when we pop into game, we're greeted to this title screen, and from here we see our first little step backwards. In previous games, it always showed either Sly or the Cooper gang running in a dramatic animation, almost as if to create anticipation as you opened the game up. It kind of makes me feel like I'm about to watch my favorite TV show, or how this wasn't your typical 3D platformer. This goes back as early as Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. The immediate thud of the Sony Computer Entertainment logo only to bounce back off. The alarm screeching as the spotlight presents the developers Sucker Punch Productions. It really provides this game with that film noir atmosphere. As for Thieves in Time, all you get is the Sanzaru monkey running wildly towards the TV screen with a say no evil, speak no evil, see no evil gesture before it immediately cuts to the gang spinning in a time portal. It doesn't create the same kind of mystique that the other 3 games did. Thieves in Time's opening feels abrupt, and it doesn't leave me wanting to look forward to what this game has to offer. Previous Sly Cooper games' openings gave a certain amount of personality, introducing the player to the comic book-like realm it was trying to immerse them into. Sly 4 doesn't quite open up with that same kind of immersion. Rather, there's a certain type of plainness to Thieves in Time, like it's not trying to be a Sly Cooper game. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. After all, I just started the game, and I'm already starting to find problems. So, I guess it's necessary that I give this one a proper chance, right?
But as time went on, the old itch came back, and I knew I needed to pull a heist.
The old itch came back, huh? Isn't that a little bit regressive to his character development? I mean, the significance to the ending of Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves is that, at the end, Sly basically was saying that he no longer wanted to live in the shadow of his family. He gave up the treasure in the Cooper vault to his friends, and he wanted to live a life with Carmelita Fox, and basically he left to get a life that was more fulfilling to him personally. And now, all of a sudden, Thieves in Time is saying that he wants to go back. Okay, so I'm already being critical on the onset, but first I think it might be necessary to explain this game's plot. So Sly 4 basically opens with Sly recounting the events from the last game. He has given up to be with Carmelita and faked his own amnesia. For the most part, he's been happy. That is, until he sees a treasure within a glass vase in the museum. From there, he realizes that he wants to go back to his thieving days. Meanwhile, the contents of the Thievius Raccoonus have been disappearing, and Bentley, realizing that something must be done, regroups the gang, and they go on another adventure. Well, I will say that Sanzaru did a fair job with these cutscenes. Yeah, they don't quite have the same comic book feel that the predecessors had, but they tried, to say the least. However, if there's one problem I had with it, this does unveil a more childish tone for the game. You see, Sly Cooper always struck the right balance between being mature, but not overdoing it so that there could be an appeal to all types of people. The art style in the first 3 games resonated a film noir atmosphere. It helped me take Sly Cooper seriously and created a unique setting for the games that I haven't seen in other 3D platformers. However, Thieves in Time makes me feel like I'm watching a Saturday morning cartoon. The illustrations come across as oversaturated and sometimes cringy looking. I'll talk more about the tone later on, but for now, I need to cover...
The old itch came back.
Right, so the main problem with this stems from the fact that there is no build-up for Sly to get to this point. At one instance, he was where he was at the end of Sly 3, satisfied with his new life with Carmelita, but then all of a sudden he feels the need to steal something. I guess maybe a good counter-argument is that Sly was enculturated as a thief. It runs in his bloodline, so it would make sense that he never truly left that life to begin with. However, the biggest issue is that it's very coincidental with how it happens. And this is the case with a lot of the story events in Sly 4, and trust me, we'll get there.
Penelope? But why would she...
Exactly my thoughts at that point in the game. But to return to this plot point, it feels like a thought just suddenly entered into Sly's mind, and when Bentley eventually called upon him for his assistance, he joins him without hesitation. It kind of makes him come across as selfish, and it's also not consistent with where Sly 3 left off. That wink of an eye could have meant anything, but it didn't necessarily mean that Sly was going to come back. That's why it worked. It was vague. But in Thieves in Time, he's still unsatisfied, even in his relationship with Carmelita, so he regrets leaving his friends in the first place. I guess indecisive is another word I'd use to describe him. If you're just going to temporarily quit, and then go back as if nothing happened, what's the point of quitting in the first place? There doesn't seem to be much of an inner struggle here. He just changes out of his suit and tie and back into his Cooper outfit. There's no contemplation. I'd imagine realistically that Sly'd have a moment to think this through. He'd be struggling whether to tell Carmelita, or worrying what she might think. He might be wondering what it is that makes him truly happy. But we can't have that because this is a kid's game. Yeah, A kid's game that, might I remind you, had Sly's own father murdered in cold blood. But if I were being completely honest, even the plot itself suffers from relying too much on coincidences. It turns out that Carmelita had always speculated that Sly was lying to her, and all this time she was waiting for the right time to oust him. I mean, what? Sanzaro needs to explain how Carmelita started to speculate, and they sort of do when she joins them in a time-traveling journey, but even then, the way they do it is basically say that she had always been suspicious. Maybe after Sly leaves, have a scene where Carmelita wrestles to accept the fact that Sly had returned to his life of thieving, and make it gradual, as if she's slowly processing. Not instantaneous, like how Thieves in Time does it. In one scene she's dining with Sly, then in the next she's back to being typical Carmelita. It all just feels like Sanzaro was rushed to get this running without thinking about the details first. And this includes the time-traveling aspect of the game as well. Now, time-traveling can be hard to write, but the way Sanzaro did it, you can tell they just rushed. So the way it works is that an object from that specific time period needs to be placed inside of Bentley's time machine in order to travel there. The problem? How exactly do they find an item to that specific period? Sanzaro's solution is to just have them show up where the gang needs them most. I'm not even kidding. So Carmelita just happens to have a gem from the museum to take them to ancient Arabia. Murray's necklace just happens to be from the Ice Age period, even though it was from the Guru, so shouldn't it transport them there? I think a better way to do this is to look up which time period they needed to go to for each ancestor and transport to that same time period. Yeah, time-traveling stories are hard, but this is just so coincidence-relying without any proper exposition as to how it works. But I'm grilling this game a lot, and surely it manages to at least capture the normal feel of Sly Cooper, right? Pulling off heists, the Metal Gear Solid Binocucom conversations. Well, no, not really. So this game actually takes a lot of liberties with making Sly Cooper as cutesy and kid-friendly as possible. I've already touched on the differently styled cutscenes, but the dialogue itself manifests a lighter tone. In particular, the Binocucom conversations. There were little jokes here and there in previous Sly games, but Thieves in Time, none of the characters feel like they're taking anything seriously. And this isn't a funny kind of humor. This is the humor that feels like it's just there because Sanzaro Games interpreted Sly to be a wisecracker, I guess.
Sly, this place is locked down tighter than, well, tighter than something.
Your database security, Murray's pants.
Whatever, Sly. This is no laughing matter. An object in a locked case through the town. From the level of security, I'd bet the farm it's Gallant's Cade.
You have a farm?
Just get over there.
It's awkward when Bentley directly calls him out on it. Kind of makes their relationship come across as less genuine and more like co-workers than friends.
Mustache looks bigger. What have you been feeding it?
Pay attention, Sly.
And maybe I'm nitpicking this, but often I felt like Bentley was a little bit too over-articulate with his body language. Yes, his animations were a bit stilted in the originals, but here it makes him come across as petulant. Or maybe it's his overall redesign. Same can be said for Sly, who always seems to have an obnoxious smirk on his face. But that's all nothing compared to what they did to Murray. Not only did they turn him into a fat loafer who does nothing but snack,
Why don't you come back to the hideout and have a snack?
he also comes across like a blatant hypocrite. So when the Cooper gang reaches the Ice Age, they find that Bob Cooper is completely out of shape. So Murray trains him back into action through a series of minigames. But then he learns that he himself is just as unhealthy as Bob when he can't climb an ice wall. Like, what? All this time you've been barking orders at Bob only to learn that you were just as unfit. It makes Murray in this game come across as unlikable, to say the least. Then he manages to defeat the Grizz on his own, which causes the gang to pat him on the back and give him the "You've been a good boy" acclamation.
Murray, we all make mistakes. It happens. But it doesn't matter because we're a team and we all have each other's backs. That's why we're unbeatable.
Yeah, what he said. Today, you were the hero, Murray, and don't you forget it.
Yes, it's true that Murray in the past has articulated some form of juvenileness, but even in the Thievius Raccoonus, he wasn't really known for eating a lot. Sanzaro just took one look at Murray and went, "Oh, he must be a voracious eater." Where do they get their ideas for these characters from? Sure, maybe he's still the Murray, and he's still as muscle-heavy as previous titles, but add one small change to his personality, like him eating a lot, and it ruins the entire character. In fact, most of the Cooper gang doesn't get too much of a mention. Instead, since they're traveling in time, the main stars are the Cooper ancestors. There's Ryuichi, Tennessee, Galeth, Bob, and Salim al-Kupar. All of them their own caricatures. Ryuichi is brooding, Bob Cooper is dumb, Tennessee is fun-loving, and Salim is Arabic.
I tried.
They don't develop the story much, and they're very one-note. However, Carmelita takes a liking to them, at least Tennessee and Galeth. Clearly, she just does it to spite Sly, and the developers just wanted some funny romantic comedy. However, once you leave their respective time period, it's not brought up again. And speaking of not being brought up again, let's talk about the villains in this game, who are all one-time wonders. In previous Sly Cooper games, or Sly 2 at least, a lot of the villains would show up more than once, which actually allowed them to create more of an impact to the gang. We were able to see how much of a threat they were as they utilized the clockwork parts for different means. However, in Sly 4, not only is their appearance limited to one episode, they aren't really villains I'd describe as threatening. El Jefe maybe could have been treated seriously if it wasn't for the ass-slapping scene. Toothpick is just your self-interested narcissistic cowboy who worships himself. Grizz, a failed artist who likes to rap. Miss Decibel, an elephant who has a trumpet stuck up her trunk that was also a failed artist. It feels like the creativity at Sanzaru was running dry when this game has two failed artists as villains. And then there's Penelope. Like, I don't even know what Sanzaru was thinking with this one. Right from the beginning of the game, she just disappears, and we never see her again until the 4th episode, where she's all of a sudden evil because she thought that Bentley was spoiling himself with Sly. I don't know. Even she has trouble explaining herself.
I'm not going to be one of the bad guys, Penelope.
Huh, bad guys? That's kind of funny, Bentley, seeing as how you work for a thief. But you know the most valuable thing Sly ever stole? Your potential. Together, we could change the world, but you're still chasing after honor for chump change. When are you gonna wake up?
So you sold out to La Paradox for the money?
No, you're not listening. He's just a means to an end.
Wait. Hold up a sec. There's like 1,000 thoughts going through my head. So is Sly really a bad guy? He steals from other criminals and thieves, so there's a little gray area there. But I mean, she says she did this so that Bentley could see the potential. I'm not really following. Potential for what? If you join one of his enemies, then Bentley will turn on you. You can't just expect him to think that suddenly she has a point and he abandoned Sly, who by the way was a childhood friend growing up.
We could have made billions in weapon design.
So I guess at some point Penelope just lost the satisfaction of being with the Cooper gang and decided to take matters into her own hands. And the fact that by doing this she somehow thought she was proving a point to Bentley, I mean, if she were smart, she'd know that Bentley wouldn't see this as a gray thing. Okay, so maybe there are some people that apparently think this can be justified. It is true that she used to disguise herself as the Black Baron, so she's no stranger to alternate personalities. But I don't know, to me it just looks like Sanzaru was like, hey, we can't come up with another villain. How about we use Penelope? Or because there was so little homage to the rest of the gang from Honor Among Thieves, they just decided to insert her there. Maybe it would have been better if La Paradox brainwashed Penelope instead of her just joining him consciously. This one guy even posited a rewrite in which Penelope was an old friend to La Paradox and met up with him online, in which he spiced up her food and was brainwashed by Miss Decibel's music. Something like that could have worked. But as I've said for many of the other plot points in this game, there's basically no build-up to this. She's gone in one scene, then reappears in the next as a villain. And then you have villains like La Paradox, who is the main antagonist of the game. He only appears as a silhouette at the end of the 1st episode, then he's mentioned here and there, and never reappears until the 5th episode. I could say that he had no proper build-up because, well, he really didn't. But his overall demeanor and embodiment doesn't come across as a very threatening villain for me. I mean, he's a skunk, and compared to Dr. Rem, who has a monkey with a robot suit, Neela, who double-crosses the Cooper gang, and Carmelita, And Clockwork, the robotic owl haunting Sly Cooper for centuries, this guy just doesn't intimidate me at all. What is his fighting style? Just fencing with a little sword? Okay, so I've spent a lot of time tearing into the story and have been mostly negative. Does it redeem itself with the gameplay? No, not really. Well, there's some positive. So Thieves in Time captures the same feeling of accomplishing a heist that the predecessors did. It even expands on it by adding different costumes for Sly that provide additional abilities. The jail costume is my favorite since it allows Sly to roll around on lasers and push objects around, so it's the most versatile. It's a nice touch since it adds to the core gameplay without changing it too much. There's a lot of good virtue signaling to the previous games. You'll be asked to tail certain characters and do the typical stealth platforming tasks the game had you do in a sandbox environment. You'll be pickpocketing guards, shooting darts at targets as Bentley, bringing treasure back to the hideout, and it generally plays like a typical Sly Cooper game. But even then, it finds ways to ruin it. First of all, there's the loading. Good God, the loading. The game takes ages to load. Enough that I literally slammed the controller on the couch and went, "Get on with it! This isn't Wrath of Cortex!" Sometimes they'll put a little hint on the loading screen, but I'm convinced with some of these they just slap together a random fact. Dimitri used to be a frustrated artist who now sides with the Cooper gang. Wow. Coolio. Collecting treasures will unlock a reward. Okay. So then you might think, but at least the normal gameplay is good, right? Well, it's even figured out a way to fuck that up. First of all, the game has a fairly heavy reliance on minigames. The costumes are cool and all, but the minigames related to them are frustrating. In Of Mice and Mechs, one minigame has you shooting targets into archery costume. And I just hate this. Maybe I didn't break any controllers, but what is this doing in my Sly Cooper game? What's more is that there are two of these, the other being with Carmelita, one of the few times you play as her. And, well, you can barely do these. I know Sly Cooper has some minigames, but they aren't as frustrating as this. The hit detection as to where the arrow hits the target is hard to find, especially when there's a structure blocking it, and the allotted time just isn't enough. Plus, it's such a departure from the core gameplay, and it's not the only one guilty of this, hence the rhythm game sections. Well, I've already hinted at this before, but Murray has one minigame where he dresses up as Madame Geisha and starts dancing to make the guards horny. I wish I was joking. Not only is this out of place in the game, but it's insulting to Murray's character. This is not something I can see Sucker Punch's Murray doing, but I guess Sanzaru felt like you needed another dose of this when you have to do it again as belly dancing Carmelita. Were the designers at Sanzaru jerking off when they designed these minigames? The fact that they feature Carmelita and Murray being suggestive, for lack of a better word, makes these feel even more out of place. I mean, yeah, Ms. Ruby was a rhythm game in Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, but at least it wasn't like this. Also, am I the only one that feels like it's a little off-putting that with some of these, the game didn't even bother to put a proper "you fail" screen if you die? So as an example, one of the dingoes threatens to kiss Carmelita if she fails the shooting range game. So I failed this many times, and all that happened was the typical "you lose" screen. I mean, have some creativity! If you are willing to do this, have a scene where the dingo kisses her, as cringy as it is. Show us something. Don't just tell. Then there's the controls, namely the binocucomp controls. It used to be that the left stick controls movement while the right stick zooms. So many binocucomp missions are hard to do because of this change. It might seem small, but it really took time to get used to. The controls for Sly in particular feel slower. He doesn't seem as nimble as he used to be. Compared to Stealth Takedown of the original, to the Stealth Takedown of Thieves in Time.
I'll make sure he never...
Great, Sly.
There were times when I wondered if it even responded because of how slow it was. Also, Sly makes this shrieking sound when he does the cane dive. Bentley and Murray have their own downgrades as well. So with Bentley, now you have to switch to his sleep darts in the gadgets menu. He doesn't have it automatically like in previous games. As for Murray, his uppercut is replaced with a spin attack. It's no big deal, except now you have to manually take down enemies. Speaking of different characters, now Thieves in Time has you playing as the different Cooper ancestors. However, most of them end up being clones of Sly with only a slight difference. Ryuichi Cooper can ninja spire jump, except now he can aim to the point he wants to land on. Sir Galeth uses Sly's hook launch to move up walls, except now he can burst through cover. These are all Sly's moves, except now, I guess, with minor touches. They really could have done more to make these ancestors feel distinguished from Sly, because for the most part, they all just feel like Sly and don't quite make me feel like I'm playing as another character. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention this. You see Carmelita all the way to the side? So I know one of the big promises that Sanzaru made was that Carmelita would be able to be playable while free roaming around like all the others. Well, I guess she is. However, at the same time, there are practically no missions for her to play around with. In fact, the only time you'll ever get to play as her on foot is in this one boss fight with some dragons. Design decisions such as these makes me wonder whether Thieves in Time was rushed. Only being able to play as her on foot once? Well, maybe twice if you count a boat ride with Tennessee and a shooting range. It's a bit of a wasted potential. And speaking of wasted potential, Sanzaru brought back the Bentley hack minigames. This time around, they made some innovations. However, the sad thing that I must say is that most of these changes really make the experience less appealing. There are 3 types of minigames. One of them is the typical one we all know and love, except Sanzaru fucked it up with their own ideas. So basically it's the same exact thing, except now there are different codes that he needs to switch around with to perform different tasks. And this destroys the fun of the original. Why do I have to switch to a different code just to grab a key? It's annoying and made these shell minigames strenuous. Then there's the minigame that has Bentley riding a jetpack and shooting a laser gun. It's actually quite fun. You go up levels by collecting the different stars, and you fight a boss at the end. The only complaint is that there's no dying animation to the boss. Sanzaru just couldn't be bothered. Finally, there's the hack minigame that has Bentley rolling a charge on the screen. It's the same thing as what's seen in Tools of Destruction. The only difference is now you can't switch out of the 6-axis. So if it gets too difficult for you, you're pretty much stuck. And there are a lot of annoying obstacles bound to prove as an irritation.
Jeez, it's like a pinball machine in here. Jeez, it's like a pinball machine in here.
So story miss, character miss, gameplay miss, dialogue miss. Wow, that's quite a few misses. But would you believe that this game's ending is the ultimate fail it commits? So La Paradox kidnaps Carmelita and returns to the present, where he changes the timeline in which he becomes the ruler of the world. Sly falls into a trap and La Paradox ends up opening a time rift that would damage the entire time-space continuum. I don't know, I couldn't quite follow this part. So Sly engages with a boss fight with La Paradox, although I hesitate to call it even a fight, considering it's just jumping over to him and doing some quick time events. Then, La Paradox has a rather pathetic end in which he's dangling from the aircraft. Yeah, not like Dr. M, who valiantly stood in the center, beating his breasts as the Cooper Vault came down around him. Here, La Paradox literally begs to Sly Cooper to save him. Oof, I'm so intimidated by this guy. And then Sly does the dumb move of helping him, which causes Paradox to steal his paraglider. From there, Sly becomes a man lost in time. I guess it tries to go for an ending similar to Sly 3, in which everyone just goes their separate ways, but it doesn't have the same fulfillment as in Sly 3, since, while Honor Among Thieves had Sly in a place of supposed fulfillment and belonging, Thieves in Time leaves him stuck. And the worst part about it? It still has not been solved to this day. This is quite the middle finger, considering that it makes Thieves in Time come across as unnecessary. What's the point of ruining the perfect ending when you're just going to take him out of it and place him in an area less satisfying? I guess they did say they wanted to continue this via DLC, but the fact that this is where the Sly series left off kinda hurts.
We will find him.
Some people wonder if Sanzaru had a passion for the Sly Cooper franchise, or if they were just milking it for money. I think it's possible that there was some passion involved, considering that Sanzaru did show a prototype to Sony and they approved. And if I were being completely honest, all the blueprints of a next-gen Sly Cooper game are there. It's just that it gets bogged down by a watered-down story, a kid-friendly tone, and other small changes that ruined the original Sly Cooper experience. Now, of course, I know that there are rumors and speculation of a Sly 5 coming out sometime in the future, and maybe they can recover from the rather mess that was Thieves in Time. However, as they always say, only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.